A billionaire's private jet vanished from radar for 42 minutes. No signal, no pilot, no one in control. But when the plane landed safely, on time, there was no hero, no black box, no trace. Except for one empty seat. Seat 32F. She didn't speak, she didn't stay. She wasn't even on the manifest. But without her, 14,000 families in Africa would still have no roof. This is the story of the ghost in 32F and the contract that almost never happened. Marcus Caldwell didn't believe in charity. He believed in numbers, until someone saved his life in Kandahar. 15 years later, he boarded the Gulfstream 700 with his 13-year-old son, Ethan, bound for Abuja, Nigeria. In exactly 87 minutes, he would sign a $1.6 billion humanitarian deal to build 14,000 homes across the most forgotten villages in Africa. It wouldn't make headlines, it wouldn't boost his stock, but for once, it wasn't about profit. At seat 1A, he reviewed specs. At 1B, his son fell asleep. At 32F, a woman stared straight ahead, unblinking, unknown, unlisted. And 18 minutes into takeoff, the jet went silent. No radar, no GPS, no communication. Just 42 minutes of emptiness. No one panicked yet. But someone had prepared for this, because this wasn't a hijack. This wasn't a robbery. This was a reroute. A delay meant collapse. A missed signature meant villages would stay roofless, and the world would never know. But the woman in 32F knew. 18 minutes into flight, the Gulfstream 700 soared above the Atlantic, smooth as silk. Ethan slept peacefully under a white cashmere blanket. Marcus stared out the window, calculating the future of 14,000 homes and silently the future of his legacy. Then a shift. Subtle, barely noticeable. The navigation screen embedded in the seat glitched for a second. Cabin lights dimmed, flickered, then stabilized. A few passengers looked up. The flight attendant reset the panel and smiled politely. Just the system syncing to a new satellite. Marcus didn't flinch. But in 32F, the woman's eyes moved, just once, toward the ceiling vent. She'd seen this before. At exactly 18 minutes into flight, synchronized interference pulses were the signature of a jammer. High-grade military tech, not commercial. The plane wasn't glitching, it was being veiled. At 20 minutes in, the backup transponder quietly shut down. At 21 minutes, the jet drifted 1 degree off course. No alerts, no alarms, just silence. Somewhere below, a signal relay truck activated on a remote airstrip in Mali. It began transmitting false coordinates to the Gulfstream system, making it appear exactly where it should be, while nudging it east minute by minute. The contract in Abuja required a physical signature from Marcus Caldwell, no later than 1 p.m. local time. Any delay, any no-show, and the deal would void itself. Legally airtight, irreversible. Behind this clause was years of negotiation with Nigerian civil engineers, opposition from multinational property syndicates who stood to lose billions if the plan succeeded. One of them had decided to stop playing clean. Inside the jet systems, an auxiliary navigation module wired quietly below deck had been activated just before takeoff. A repair technician in Naples had been scheduled for minor maintenance the night before. He'd never been on record. No one remembered his face. At 23 minutes in, the plane's onboard computer stopped broadcasting any signal to ground control. It had gone completely dark, But it didn't crash. Instead, it moved forward, on schedule, on time, but toward the wrong sky. And the only person who noticed was still sitting in silence. 32F, arms folded, not blinking, waiting.
At minute 25, air traffic control in Lisbon sent a routine ping. The Gulfstream didn't respond. They tried again. Nothing. A third time. Still nothing. It didn't raise alarms. Private jets dropped signal often over oceanic handoffs, but by minute 30, ATC quietly flagged the silence. An alert went out. Routine, but watchful. At 31, the radar icon for Caldwell's jet froze for half a second, then resumed. What ATC didn't know, the plane wasn't responding at all. The systems on the Gulfstream had been hijacked, not by hackers, but by hardware. Underneath seat 27C, inside the service hatch, a thin, black box the size of a shoe was humming. This was no jammer in the crude sense. It was a signal simulator, one used in intelligence operations to spoof transponder data. To the world, Marcus Caldwell's jet was right where it should be. To reality, it was 250 miles off course, drifting slowly toward a private airstrip in southern Algeria. And no one knew. No one except her. Nyasha leaned back in her seat. Her face remained still, but her right hand slowly reached for the belt loop at her side. Clipped there, almost invisible, was a short-blade screwdriver, military issue. Across the aisle, a passenger asked for champagne. The attendant smiled. At minute 33, the jet began to descend slightly, too gradual for passengers to notice, but enough to adjust its projected arrival time by 13 minutes. That was the window. 13 minutes too late equaled $1.6 billion lost. No contract, no homes, no future. And nobody would be able to blame anyone, because on paper, the jet was on course. There'd be no suspects, no claims, just a missed meeting and one ruined man. Except, underneath her vest, Nyasha's earpiece buzzed, barely audible. It wasn't connected to the jet, it wasn't broadcasting, but it was tracking ambient pulse frequencies. And now it had locked on. The jammer wasn't just on the plane, it was inside it. She stood. Not fast, not loud. She reached into the overhead bin, pulled out a small black pouch, and walked, slow, controlled, toward the rear lavatory. The cabin light shimmered again, and behind the bulkhead, somewhere beneath the polished floor, the woman in 32F began her descent into the dark.
The hatch hissed as Nyasha dropped into the crawl space beneath the jet. Dim light, tangled wires, the vibration of the engines rattling inches above her spine. She moved low and silent, military muscle memory kicking in, elbows tight, boots precise. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm of tactical control. Her fingers traced the signal cable, insulated, interrupted. She found the tap. A small box duct-taped to the primary data line, flashing green. Signal diverter, GPS rerouter, designed to lie. She reached into her pouch, pulled out a wire sniffer and an old SIM-locked phone, burner tech. No emissions, no trace. And as she clipped the device to the line, a sound. A man's voice, calm, white, confident. 15 years ago. If you don't move, they'll find us both. Nyasha, 23, lay prone in the sand, blood soaking through her uniform. Gunfire cracked overhead. Flames painted the night in Kandahar orange. A young American man, unarmed, dressed in civilian gear, crawled beside her, pressing gauze to her side. "Who are you?" she asked. "Just a systems guy. I monitor logistics. Got caught in the wrong grid."
She laughed once, bitter. Welcome to my world. Together they waited 6 hours in a ditch. When the gunfire ceased, she stood first. He was shaking. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Name's Caldwell." She paused. "Nyasha. No last name?" She shook her head. "None that matters." Back in the jet, her hands didn't tremble as she sliced the bypass wire. That night in Kandahar, she could have left him. Nobody would have known, nobody would have blamed her. Instead, she'd carried him half a mile to extraction. He never forgot. A year later, her unit was dissolved, her records sealed, her name erased. But months ago, she'd received a one-line message from an untraceable address. "I never forgot. If you ever want to disappear again, there's a seat on 32F. She didn't reply. She just boarded. Now, in the underbelly of a billion-dollar jet, Nyasha clipped the diverter cable, replaced it with a clean line from her pouch, and watched the green light go red. The world would see the Gulf Stream again. And Marcus Caldwell? He'd have 1 hour left to make good on a promise that once saved his life.
When she re-emerged from the maintenance hatch, no one noticed. Nyasha dusted off the edges of her pants, slipped her pouch back into the overhead bin, and eased into seat 32F as if nothing had happened. She crossed her arms, leaned back, and stared straight ahead, expression unreadable. To any observer, she looked like someone waiting for landing, maybe a private security guard, maybe a dignitary's assistant. But no one asked. She liked it that way. The Gulfstream's cabin lighting had returned to a warm, steady hue. Champagne glasses clinked. The pilots reported no abnormalities. And yet, the digital navigational system was now back in control. For the first time in 38 minutes, the plane was on track. Its signal restored, its GPS coordinates syncing in real time. But the real threat hadn't ended. As she sat, Nyasha noticed it. Movement across the aisle. A man she hadn't clocked before. Too young to be crew, too old to be a tourist. His eyes weren't scanning the cabin, they were scanning her. His right hand tapped a rhythm on his knee. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. That was a signal. Ex-military, Russian origin. She recognized it instantly. There was another one on board. Maybe more. And now they knew she wasn't a passive passenger. Nyasha tilted her head slightly. Her eyes didn't move. She simply adjusted her seatbelt. Her right hand slowly reached behind her hip, feeling for the small titanium clip sewn into the fabric of her waistband. Not a weapon, a tool. Not enough to win, just enough to break. Across the cabin, the man stood and headed toward the galley. Casual, calm. But his gait gave him away. Left foot heavy, right shoulder low. He was carrying weight on his right side, concealed, likely strapped near the hip. He wasn't going for a drink. Nyasha exhaled slowly. The reroute had failed, but the secondary objective, damage, panic, delay, might still be in play. She whispered under her breath, "Not on this flight." The PA system chimed overhead. The pilot announced they would arrive 10 minutes early. Applause rippled through the cabin. Nyasha didn't smile. She unbuckled her belt, rose from 32F, and walked toward the back of the jet, slow and steady. It was time to find the rest of them.
Nyasha reached the rear galley, paused by the lavatory door, then opened a narrow service panel on the wall, barely wider than her shoulders. She ducked inside and sealed it shut behind her. The lighting changed instantly. Red LEDs, tight wiring, pressurized air vents. The maintenance shaft ran along the spine of the aircraft, a narrow steel tunnel built for repair techs, not operatives. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for truth. In her hand was the scanner she'd clipped to the false GPS node earlier. It buzzed once, then twice, then locked green. Another signal source, still active. That meant the rerouter she disabled was only one piece of the sabotage. She crawled forward, tracing wire bundles that snaked like arteries beneath the floor. The hull vibrated around her, soundless to passengers, but clear to her trained senses. Then, she found it. Tucked behind insulation foam near the avionics bay, a gray cube, matte finish, no branding. Military-grade interference unit. It was patched directly into the jet's internal comms, a silent intruder that could loop cabin audio, simulate voice signatures, even override emergency alerts. In short, it could make the flight look and sound normal, while being anything but. Nyasha's jaw tightened. This wasn't amateur sabotage. This was multi-layered digital warfare, designed not to destroy, but to deceive. She pulled out a fiber cutter the size of a pen, slid it under the main port, and froze. Movement. Up above, through the metal flooring, she felt footfalls, heavier than cabin crew. 2 people, not walking, shifting weight like they were preparing for force. They knew she was down here. She clicked off her scanner, killed all signals, and pressed her back against the curved bulkhead. Every breath controlled, every muscle quiet. From her vest, she retrieved a short graphite spike, custom-made, non-metallic. It looked like a stylus. It wasn't. A clank echoed behind her, access panel near the midsection being opened. Nyasha spun, slithered up a maintenance ladder like liquid shadow, and reached the next floor before the man behind her could spot movement. She dropped silently into the galley, just as the attendant turned. "Excuse me," but Nyasha was already moving.
Nyasha moved forward, her steps calculated, body angled just enough to avoid passenger eye lines, just slow enough to not draw attention. The cockpit door was reinforced, triple lock magnetic, biometric override. No one got through without clearance. But Nyasha had studied Gulfstream 700s for years, unofficially. 2 inches to the left of the door handle, beneath the decorative inlay, was a maintenance bypass, a relic of old models, meant for system resets. She inserted a micro-prong wrapped in copper tape. A soft click. The door didn't open, but the lock reset flashed amber, blinking once. That was her chance. Inside the cockpit, the co-pilot was alone. Captain Alvarez had been told to rest during cruise. Now, bound in the cabin's crew quarters, gagged and zip-tied, he was out of sight and out of the loop. The man flying the Gulfstream wasn't on any company roster. He wore the uniform, had the voice, knew the lingo, but he wasn't trained for the override Nyasha triggered. When the cockpit door hissed open, he spun too late. Nyasha stepped inside, jammed her left knee into the console to block his arm reach, and drove her elbow into his throat with a clean downward arc. He gasped, grabbing for the yoke. She countered, twisting his wrist and slamming his head against the reinforced glass panel. The jet dipped slightly, then stabilized. She hit autopilot, activated the seat lock, and shoved him into the co-pilot's chair, strapping both arms with a restraining cord from her vest. He coughed blood. "Who the hell are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed the cabin intercom. "Get me Alvarez." A beat, then static. Then the captain's voice, weak, groggy. "Who's flying my plane?" "You will, in 2 minutes." She glanced at the flight clock. 1:48 p.m. Nigerian time. 12 minutes until landing. 14 minutes until the contract window closed. She glanced back at the imposter. "You weren't supposed to fly it far, were you?" He smirked. "Just far enough to miss the mark." She turned to the dashboard. There was one more system to fix. The encrypted data relay. If she couldn't re-enable it, Marcus wouldn't be able to sign remotely, The contract would fail. All this would be for nothing. The man behind her chuckled. "You're too late." Nyasha didn't speak. She reached under the panel and yanked out the imposter's own thumb drive, still glowing. She crushed it under her heel. The cockpit lights flickered once. Then, the link reconnected.
The cockpit lights glowed steady now, but everything about the flight path was still wrong. The jet was physically on course, thanks to Nyasha's reroute, but digitally, it was still broadcasting a false trajectory. To the outside world, the Gulfstream 700 was 300 miles east, cruising over open desert. And no data meant no signature. No signal, no confirmation, no homes. Nyasha dropped into the pilot's chair, fingers dancing across the manual interface. The encrypted relay had reconnected, but the plane's flight ID registry was still spoofed. She had to bluff the bluff. She accessed the legacy firmware system, the one few pilots used anymore. Old code, unpatched, vulnerable. From her vest, she pulled a mini drive with a pre-written mirrored flight plan, matching the exact altitude, velocity, and timestamp the fake signal was feeding out. Except hers had a twist. She programmed it to shadow the false jet for 2 minutes, then override the position entirely, flooding the satellite with corrected telemetry. It was dangerous. If the system caught the mismatch, it could crash the uplink, or worse, trigger a security lockout. "You're gambling the whole deal," the imposter growled from behind her. She didn't look back. You were gambling lives. Click, click, enter. Override engaged. A red bar blinked. Confirm flight ID update? She clicked yes. The cockpit screen glitched, then settled. Coordinates realigned. The aircraft's ID re-registered on civilian radar. Caldwell 1 was back online. In the cabin, Marcus's tablet chimed. A satellite uplink flashed green. Secure authenticated channel established. He looked at Ethan, then to the stewardess, who stared at him like he was a god. He tapped the screen, signed the digital page, and pressed send. Timestamp, 12:58 p.m. Abuja time. The contract locked in. Back in the cockpit, Nyasha leaned back, but only for a second, because a second alert triggered, this time from the cabin sensors. Someone had breached the avionics panel. Her bluff worked, but someone else had one left to play. She stood, rearmed the manual lock on the cockpit door, and turned. "It's never just one plan," she whispered, then disappeared back into the belly of the jet.
12 minutes left. In the cabin, time was invisible. Passengers sipping drinks, business partners preparing their landing pitch, unaware that a billion-dollar contract teetered on the edge of a digital cliff. But in Marcus Caldwell's hands, time was loud. The tablet in front of him displayed a live countdown, 0012:14. That was how long he had to submit his final biometric signature to Abuja's Ministry of Housing, where the contract to build 14,000 homes would vanish into bureaucracy. One clause, one timestamp, one chance. He stared at the screen. It was ready, but the satellite handshake flickered. The signal hadn't fully stabilized. He needed 3 green bars. He had 2. His pulse quickened. "Ethan," he whispered, glancing at his son, "if I don't get this in..." The boy looked up. "We're not going to make it?" Marcus hesitated. "We might, if she does." In the underdeck, Nyasha crawled through a vent no wider than her shoulders. Sweat lined her arms. Her breath timed to the vibrations of the floor above. She reached the avionics panel, now pried open. Someone else had been here.
The backup jammer, smaller, modular, was tucked behind a coolant pipe, crude but dangerous. If activated, it would block just enough uplink bandwidth to corrupt the satellite signature, faking a timeout, a glitch, enough to void a contract. Nyasha cursed under her breath. This was the real failsafe, the final layer, the one planted in case the fake pilot failed. She grabbed the module, yanked it free. Alarms didn't sound, but someone noticed. A thud echoed behind her. She turned. 2 men, military posture, clean gear, suppressor equipped, crawled in from the rear access bay. "Give us the module," one said. "No," she replied, eyes locked. They didn't argue. The first lunged. Nyasha kicked upward, slamming her boot into his throat. He fell backward, choking. The second slashed at her with a fixed blade. She twisted, letting the knife slice past her side, and drove her elbow into his temple. Both were down, but she was bleeding. She jammed the module into a service microwave beside her, slammed the door, and hit start. It sparked, flashed, burned, then died. Back in the cabin, 3 green bars. The satellite locked. Marcus pressed his thumb against the screen. A voice message chimed. "Submission received. Timestamp verified." He looked at Ethan. "We made it." Ethan didn't reply. He pointed. Behind Marcus, someone opened the avionics door again. And this time, they weren't holding a knife.
The man emerging from the avionics panel wasn't one of the 2 Nyasha had just taken down. He was bigger, older, and more prepared. His shoulders filled the access crawlway, combat boots, tactical harness, scar running down the left side of his neck. He wasn't dressed to blend in. He was dressed to finish the job. In one hand, he held a short-barrel stun baton. In the other, a backup jammer. "Give me the boy," he said, calmly. Behind him, Ethan froze. Marcus instinctively stepped in front of his son, shielding him. "You're too late," Marcus said. "The deal's signed." The man smiled. "That's not why I'm here anymore." Nyasha crashed through the maintenance door before anyone could scream. Blood on her side, eyes locked, breathing sharp but steady. She didn't hesitate. She threw the graphite spike, short, silent, a blur of gray. It struck the man's wrist, forcing him to drop the baton. He spun, shocked but fast. She closed the gap, driving a knee into his ribs. He staggered. He countered, headbutted her hard. She reeled back but kept balance. They locked. It was not a cinematic fight. No flourishes, no wasted motion. Every move was to disable or kill. He grabbed her vest, slammed her into the side panel. Sparks flew as her back struck exposed circuitry. She grunted, more pain than breath, but elbowed his jaw, spun low and swept his leg. He fell, but didn't stay down. From the floor he punched upward, catching her in the ribs, right where she'd been cut. She cried out. Marcus reached for the stun baton. The man kicked it away. Ethan lunged, grabbing the device, pointed it at the attacker, hands shaking. The man snarled, turned toward the boy. But Nyasha was faster. She drove her palm into his throat, then her forearm across his windpipe, pinning him to the panel. The hum of cabin electronics distorted as the two struggled. Then she slammed his head against the bulkhead, once, twice, 3 times, until he went still. Silence. Nyasha stood, bloodied, chest heaving. Ethan stared, frozen. She looked at him, nodded once. "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly. Marcus stepped forward, speechless. "You're not supposed to exist," he said. She looked at him. I never did. Then turned, limping, slow, and disappeared down the service corridor before anyone else arrived.
The Gulfstream 700 began its final descent. Landing gear locked, flaps adjusted. The cabin lights dimmed as Abuja's scorched skyline came into view. But for Marcus Caldwell, time still ticked like a bomb. 1 p.m. That was the contract cutoff. The biometric signature had been submitted, yes, but one final confirmation code, issued only upon wheels down, had to be transmitted to seal the deal. And the link? Still volatile. In the cockpit, Captain Alvarez fought dizziness as he took the yoke back, blood drying on his temple, wrists sore from zip ties. Beside him, the fake co-pilot was unconscious, slumped in the locked chair. Alvarez looked at the screen. Everything looked normal, too normal. He turned to the camera feed of the cabin. Empty aisle, passengers calm, except for one seat, 32F, vacant. In the service corridor, Nyasha limped toward the emergency exit bay near the cargo hold. Her side bled through gauze she barely had time to wrap. Her knuckles were raw, her breath shallow, but she kept moving. Behind her, no applause, no thanks, just silence. Back up front, the landing wheels screeched against Abuja's runway. Touchdown. The cockpit registered it instantly. In Marcus's hand, the tablet buzzed. Physical landing confirmed, final contract locked. He exhaled, deep and shaking. Ethan leaned into his arm. "We made it," Marcus said quietly. But Ethan wasn't looking at the tablet. He was staring out the window. On the tarmac, a ground crew worker waved an orange cone toward the jet. He paused. His headset crackled. "Gulfstream 700, do you copy?" No reply. The worker approached the rear stairwell, already descending. But no one stepped out. Not yet. Instead, 30 seconds passed. Then, a woman appeared. Drenched in sweat, limping, vest torn. She walked down the steps slowly, past the engines still spinning. No ID badge, no words. Just a silent silhouette against the shimmering heat. The ground worker squinted. Who the hell? But she kept walking. Past the cones, past the crew, past the open SUV. No one stopped her. No one could. She crossed the airstrip like a shadow melting under the sun. And by the time security arrived, there was no trace of 32F.
The official statement read like any other flight report. Minor technical delay. No casualties. Flight resumed. Touchdown on time. There was no mention of sabotage. No entry on the passenger manifest for seat 32F. No surveillance footage during the critical 42 minutes. No record of the woman seen walking across the tarmac, as if she'd never existed. But someone remembered. 3 weeks later, on a dusty plain outside Kaduna, Nigeria, the first of 14,000 homes broke ground. A child placed a single stone where her future bedroom would stand. The village gathered to watch. No ceremony, no cameras, just promise. Marcus Caldwell didn't attend, but he sent a package to the site. Inside, a small bronze plaque, engraved with a name most wouldn't recognize. For 32F. No name, no uniform, no glory. But without you, we'd still be homeless. They mounted it to the first house. Back in D.C., government analysts reviewed the satellite logs. They found anomalies, jumps in flight data, pings that shouldn't exist. One agent wrote, "We're missing 42 minutes of verified airspace over sovereign territory. Recommend deeper probe." That file was marked classified and buried. Marcus never spoke about the flight again, but when a reporter asked him why he gave away $1.6 billion for homes that would never carry his name, he paused, then said, "Because someone once carried me when no one else would, and she didn't ask for anything in return. As for Ethan, years later when he became CEO himself, he kept a framed seat tag on his office wall, 32F. No one knew what it meant, but when people asked, he only smiled. Some heroes wear medals, some ride in parades, some have names etched in stone, but some sit quietly in the back of a plane, waiting for no thanks, doing the right thing, then disappearing forever.
In today's world, where recognition and spotlight often follow every good deed, the story of 32F reminds us of something deeper. Not everyone who does the right thing gets remembered. Nyasha didn't act to be seen. She never asked for credit, never made headlines, and technically, she didn't even exist in any system. Yet because of her, 14,000 families in one of Nigeria's poorest regions will have a place to sleep, a second chance, a future. That is silent sacrifice. That is loyalty without conditions. That is doing what's right with no reward expected. Her story asks us a haunting question. How many people out there, quiet, nameless, invisible, have saved us, protected us, or changed our lives without us ever knowing? If this story moved you, even just a little, don't let it disappear like she did. Hit like, share this video, and subscribe to LifeMoral Tales for more true inspired stories of silent courage and moral dilemmas. Now tell us in the comments, have you ever witnessed someone do the right thing quietly without recognition? Or what would you have done if you were in seat 32F? We read every comment. We reply to many. Your thoughts build this community. And if you think this story was unforgettable, wait until you hear about the maid who brought down a tech empire. That one might just change the way you see loyalty forever. Subscribe now, because tomorrow's story might be about someone sitting next to you.